May, we found out something was wrong. So in June, we found out it was cancer. In July, we found out it was stage 4. And in August, he had a surgery to stabilize his leg, and he started chemo. By September 25, that was the day he passed away.
Thank you for joining us on Silently Bleeding, Hope for the Pastor's Wife. Today, our special guest is Anneliese Story. Welcome, Anneliese.
Thank you, Jan. It's nice to be here.
Anneliese, where did you grow up?
I actually was born in Brazil, São Paulo, Brazil, and we moved here when I was 7. So from then on, I grew up in Bridgeton, New Jersey.
Okay, awesome. What is your story?
My husband and I met my husband in Bridgeton, New Jersey. He became my pastor there. We ended up getting married and ended up being associate pastors in Michigan. Then we went to the mission field in Germany as missionaries for 4 years. And then we came back to Michigan and pastored a church that ended up becoming an international church. We were there for 18 years. And then we ended up, he ended up being elected to a secretary treasurer of the Michigan Ministry Network. And he did that until he got the cancer. So that's kind of my story. After my husband went into the district work, I kind of didn't have anything to do. I mean, I'd lost my position in the church. I wasn't really a pastor's wife per se. My kids were grown and getting married. So I told my husband one day, what am I going to do with myself? I need to find something to do. And he said, Ann, you always wanted to write. This is your chance. And so that's how my writing journey began. And I became an author.
So tell me a little bit about your husband. He got cancer. Did you know about that for a year or two, or what was the timetable on that?
So in May, we found out something was wrong. In June, everything takes longer to get tested during that whole COVID time. So in June, we found out it was cancer. In July, we found out it was stage 4. It was a very rare stage 4 metastasized chondrosarcoma, which is a bone cancer. In July, that was in July. Then in August, he had a surgery to stabilize his leg, and he started chemo. And then by the middle of September, he had to be hospitalized. He had sepsis, and when he wasn't getting better after several days, they did a scan of his lungs and found out that his lungs were filled with lesions, which hadn't been before when they had done the body scan. So they knew the chemo hadn't even touched the cancer. It was that rare. And even though they used the top guns for the chemo, it just didn't touch it. So by September 25, that was the day he passed away.
Oh, wow. So like 3.5, 4 months.
Yeah, it was very fast. Mm-hmm.
That had to be so incredibly hard to get the news, and then just 3 or 4 months later, he's in heaven.
Yeah.
I mean,
it was very hard.
Anytime it's got to be hard, but you didn't even really have time to even begin to process all of this, I would think.
I was in shock. I actually, you go through many emotions of grief after you lose someone, but I think the emotion that I dealt with the most was guilt, because of the many things that I wished I had said and wished I had done. I know I was really, really attentive to him. I know that I probably did it all correct, but there's a part of me that feels like I could have done better. And it was just because we were both operating in shock. And the Lord really ministered to me about that, helping me to get past that. But it's really hard when you lose somebody so suddenly and you yourself are still in shock that you're not even thinking clearly sometimes.
Right. So I did an interview with Jelly Valamont about unexpectedly losing her husband. We talked a little about this, but I would like your input on for pastors' wives that are watching, and they may be in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. It doesn't matter. We never know, and not to scare anyone.
Yeah.
We don't know when God could take me or he could take my husband. So what would you say now that you've walked through this and still walking through the grief process, I'm sure, but how could the pastor's wife watching now be better prepared? God forbid that something happened to her husband or my husband.
Yeah, there are several ways that you can prepare. And thankfully, my husband was a very organized person. So he had a file system. I was able to find things easily, but not everybody has that kind of husband. Also, very often the husband is the one handling the finances. So there are several things that I would say. First of all, I would say it's really important for a woman, although she is interdependent with her husband, she should also have a bit of independence. For me, it was my writing to fall back on, because you don't want to just be completely lost when that happens. So you do need to be an individual. And I think that's really important. Another thing is you also need to know all your husband's passwords to everything. It's a digital age. And so do you even know the password to get into his computer? You can't access anything until you have that. And then once you're there, every account has a separate password. So it really helps to have a password manager. My husband had 1Password. So basically, I just needed to know 1Password to get into all his passwords to every account that he had on his computer. Another thing that was really helpful, he bookmarked everything on Google, every account on Google. So, and then he basically labeled it. For him, it was $sign, $sign, $sign. And I knew when I clicked on that, those were the bill things. And so I just clicked on that, went on the site, it automatically inserted by putting in 1Password code, it automatically inserted the correct password for that account. And I was just able to access it all. You're going to have to change your name, his name, take it off. Thankfully, there is a grace period for a lot of that stuff, but eventually, if you don't have it, if you don't have his passcodes, you're kind of sunk. So that's really important.
So, Annalise, what are some hard conversations that you and your precious husband had, or you wish you could have had? I know your time was so limited with him.
Hindsight is 2020. So I wish there are things that I wish we had talked more about. I wish we had talked more about the actual dying experience. We were so focused. As a Christian, you really focus on getting them through and holding on to faith, and you don't want to give up. So we really stayed very positive. Doctors had told us that if you have the patients that do best are the ones that have a positive attitude or maintain hope. I was zealous for him not to lose hope. So I tried not to do that. There was one point in our driving, we were driving somewhere for ministry, where he said, "Anne, can we just pull away for a moment from our positivity and talk about, if it didn't happen, that God answered our prayers the way we are hoping, can we talk about the funeral, what that would look like?" And of course, I wanted to please him, whatever would make him feel better. So I said, "Sure, we'll talk about it." And I took notes. Later, when we went back to being positive after that and held on to faith. But when he passed away, when it was all over, I was so glad for the wisdom that he had to discuss his funeral arrangements, because I would want to do justice to honor him the way that he deserved to be honored. And so I was absolutely thrilled that he had done that. I wish that we had talked more about heaven, anticipating heaven for him. I think I could have helped him to be even more. It's as hard as it is to leave. I could have helped him to maybe be even more excited about where he was heading, and he did have that. But when somebody is dying, you just go through a lot of emotions, and so I wish I had been able to talk to him more about that, but we didn't want to focus on that. So I would say I wish I had done that. I wish my husband was a writer too. I wish he had time to write a note to every child, to all of us, and then especially to my grandchildren who are still little, that we could have handed them a note from their grandfather when he's older.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So do you think it would be a really wise thing for, if we have grandchildren, to write them a letter now and not give it to them now, but hold it, that we can personally give it to them when they're 18 or 21 or whatever. Yeah. And then, God forbid, that something happened to you or me, or,
Yeah.
husband, and did happen to your husband, that then we have that. So
Yes,
this is not
absolutely.
like, oh, I wish I would have, because
exactly.
That's why we're doing this conversation. And I so appreciate your willingness, because this has to be a little difficult for you.
Yeah.
But thank you for this.
Yeah, Sure. No, definitely. I think it would help. And you could write these notes, put them in separate envelopes, put it with your estate plan, because you could die in a car accident. And where are these notes going to be found? So put it with where they're going to be looking for all your, end of life plans.
Mm.
So I would say that's actually a very good idea to do. Just a little extra something, a little special touch. When my husband passed away, we looked through his office trying to find things that were so personal about him, and we found lots of stuff. But we savored it. We wanted to hear his voice again. And I think when you pass away, your loved ones would love to hear your voice again.
I interviewed both of my parents. My mom had dementia towards the end of her life, but I interviewed them for another YouTube channel, my personal YouTube channel, just asking them questions about, when we were kids and growing up and
Mhm.
their love story. And I'm so happy that I did that because I always have that. My family has that.
Yes.
And I've got a few videos of my parents, but actually, I need to interview my husband just thinking about this.
Yeah. I know, it's amazing. He's talking to you all the time, telling you things about his past, but do you really remember it all? It helps to write it down.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yes. My daughter did that. She did an interview for my dad. It wasn't like an interview like we're doing now on paper. It was all on paper. And she did that for my dad. And I read through that. It was beautiful. And there were things I didn't know about him.
Mm.
So yeah, I think it's really nice to do that.
So, any other thoughts that would encourage that pastor's wife right now, whether, like I said, she's in her 20s or on up to 70? What is
Well,
one more thing that we could
Well,
do?
when I think the other thing I would like to mention is, do you know what kind of arrangements your husband would like? Should it be an open casket, a closed? Does he even want a casket? Should it be cremation? Favorite Bible verse, a hymn that he loves, whatever, but or a song. Find out what it is that is really personal to him, because those are the things that you want to present at a funeral. I would also say your husband's doing a lot of household tasks, probably. And I know my husband did, and I missed him. It was sometimes very, very hard to go into the garage, seeing everything that for me belonged to him, and then having to learn to use those equipment. And so if your husband can kind of begin to show you how to do some things, when do you put down the fertilizer on the grass? When does the grass need grub treatment? How to take care of your car? I'm not saying that everybody has to do that, but if it is something, if you want to be prepared, those are the things that you're going to be facing and not have learned, unless you have family members that can help you, which is great. And I do. But not everybody gets that. Some people live far away from their family. So that's another thing. I think it helps to have a list of home repair technicians. Right after my husband died, within the first 3 months, my furnace went out.
Oh,
Thankfully, I did have a list, and I was able to go directly to the one that was familiar with our house, and he gave me a decent price and had that replaced. Right after my husband died, my dishwasher went. So you need to know, yeah, you need to know some of these numbers and sites that you can go to look for someone. However, if you don't, there is another thing that helps is I went on Facebook, and you have very often every city has a page now, and there is one from my town. And on there I asked, who do you know anybody that does this, or that?
right.
And people in the community are really so willing to step up to the plate and help. And I've always been able to get good recommendations that way.
Well, that's good. That's
Yeah.
good. For that precious woman of God that's watching right now, and maybe she's facing this or does not realize she's getting ready to face this. And we're not trying to cause anyone to live in fear. We just don't know how many days we have left or our spouse has left. What word of encouragement would you have for her, Annalise?
Oh, I would say, first of all, stay really close to God now. My relationship with God really did bring me through this. In my darkest moment, when I was without words, I didn't even want to move forward. I I wish I could have just died, actually. I just cried out Jesus's name. I had that relationship with him. And when I did that, I had nothing else but to say his name. And I heard him speak to me, saying only, trust me. And I clung to that. I said those words over and over again. God, I trust you. Jesus, I trust you. And he took me step by step and has brought me through this. And I feel like living again. I want to live. I want to continue to move forward. It also helps to help others as soon as possible, find ways to be useful, because I know you definitely have to grieve. I allowed myself that time to grieve. But even in the midst of your grief, there are other people that are hurting too. And to just be right away, step in there. Don't just wallow in your grief, but keep moving forward and trying to help other people. But now, while you still have your husband, this is the time to remember. Don't just think how wonderful he is. Tell him how wonderful he is.
Oh,
Say the things that you feel in your heart. Make sure that he knows how much you honor him, and let your children see that too. And your friends, let them see by the way that you look into his eyes, the way that you talk to him, how much you love him. You don't have to tell them you love your husband. You just have to express it in the way that you treat your husband.
that's so good. That's so good. So in closing, Annalise, tell us, what are you doing right now? You kind of alluded to it in the beginning, but just go ahead and tell us just a split moment of what you're doing.
Sure. I am an author. I continued in that. My husband, as he was battling with cancer and laying on the couch, one day I just, it was my moment of weakness. I went to him and I said, what am I going to do if God doesn't answer our prayers the way we want? And without a moment's hesitation, my husband said, go in the direction of your gift.
Mm.
And I'm just a new author, so it's not like, but I still decided, well, that's what I'm going to do, and I'll just trust the Lord with the rest. Thankfully, my husband had life insurance and I didn't have to go looking for a job or anything like that right away. But anyway, I did go in the direction of my gift. I could not have imagined that 7 months into my grief journey, I'd get a call from Greg and Sandy Mundis, the executive director of foreign missions in the Assemblies of God, world missions in the Assemblies of God. Anyway, they asked me to write their story. He received a miracle, a healing miracle, and they asked me if I would write their story. This was such an honor to be asked. At the same time, I'm going to be speaking. I'm going to be writing about something that I didn't experience with the cancer, and so I was just momentarily taken aback, but immediately I remembered that I had told the Lord that whatever door he opens, I'm going to go through. And so I said, yes, I would do it. And it has ended up being a wonderful experience because it helped me to confront how my faith had become weak in the area of healing after I lost my husband. And it helped me to realize that, and I always trusted that God can heal. That never changed. But I didn't trust as much that he still was as interested in healing. Like maybe his plan had changed. Writing this book helped me to realize, no, healing is still for today. We do need to ask for healing, and God does often still heal. And it's a beautiful story, but it's also a sensitive story because not everybody experiences the same thing.
Right, right.
So I'm doing that, and I'm also helping with American Christian fiction writers. I'm in the Great Lakes region. I'm the vice president of that, and I'm also helping with women's ministry in my church. I'm going to be starting a widow's class at my church, and I'm homeschooling my grandson.
Wow. So what do you do in your spare time between 2 and 5 a.m.?
I know. I still find time, but it's like I said, it really helps to help others.
Yes, I totally, totally agree with that. Do you have your book that you just wrote on grief beside you where you can show it?
Yes, I do.
That is such a great book. I will leave a link down below. So if you are interested, it's Facing Tomorrow Without You, Annelieses Story. I would just encourage you, if you, my friend, are walking through grief or you know someone that is, I would encourage you to get this book because I think it will really help you. Well, Annalise, thank you so much for joining us today. And may God bless you in your endeavors as you go forward to be a blessing to others. Thank you, sweet woman of God, for being part of Silently Bleeding. If you need prayer, we'll leave a link down below where you can reach out and email, and I will email you back as quickly as possible and be praying for you. God bless, my friend. Thank you for watching Silently Bleeding, Finding Hope for the Pastor's Wife. I look forward to connecting with you. Feel free to leave me comments down below and make sure and subscribe. If you want to know every time a new video is coming out, hit the bell. I would be so delighted if you would also hit the like button, and feel free to share this video with anyone you know that this would encourage. Blessings, my friend.